Now, panel, let's welcome our first guest. Will you come in, please? Good evening. Nice to have you with us, one and all. Now, we will concentrate on the lady first, and will you please tell us what your name is and where you are from?
Oh, my name is Anne Brusselmans, and I come from Brussels.
Now, that is a coincidence. This is Mrs. Brusselmans, and she comes from Brussels in Belgium. Now, you gentlemen, will you identify yourselves, please, around in the circle? We'll start with you, John.
My name is John Chernovsky.
And your name, sir?
I'm Mort Mennick from Piqua, Ohio.
Yes, sir.
I am Stanley Lukowski from Mechanicville, New York.
Stanley?
I'm Paul Shipe from Danville, Pennsylvania.
This is Mr. Shipe. All right, now, the men are the ones who have the secret. So, gentlemen, if you will all gather in a huddle, whisper your secret to me, we'll share it with the folks at home. Here we go. But now, wait, there is more. Again. The panel who helped classify their secret, it concerns something that Mrs. Brusselmans did. And Bill Cullen, we'll start with you, please.
Mrs. Brusselmans, the thing you did you do it to or concerning these four men? I mean, did it concern these four men?
Yes?
Was it a physical thing?
No.
I think we'd have to say partially, Mrs. Brusselmans.
Yes.
Hmm?
And partially mental?
Partially mental.
And they're scattered all over. Were you their teacher at one time or anything like that?
No.
Well, no, you're too young. But I have to go along on that premise because this is a sneaky show. Were they your teachers? I mean,
No.
were you in their gym class or some other exciting thing? Did it have anything to do with education? Not even partially?
No.
Not even partially?
There's $20 down and $60 to go, and we go, please, to Kathryn Grant.
Did this relationship concern a commodity?
No.
She didn't give them lace. Did it concern a geographical area other than the areas mentioned tonight?
It concerned a specific geographical area, and would perhaps be helpful to you to go for that.
All right, let's start with the Western Hemisphere.
Hmm?
No.
That leaves us the Eastern Hemisphere. What do we
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Did it happen during or after World War I?
Did it happen during or after World War I?
Well, they just look like veterans, you know.
Well, we'd have to say it was after World War I.
Excuse me. World War II?
Would you break that up into two questions, please, Kathryn? You said during or after. Now, which do you want to know?
Did it happen during World War II?
Yes?
All right, where do we go from here?
You better go back to the Eastern Hemisphere, I think. It must be. Someone has to be.
Geography, I'm short. I got a line for tonight. It's, I think I'll play another stack. That means please go on to him in poker range.
All right, there's $40 down and $40 to go, and we go to Henry Morgan, please.
Don't you feel bad. We are the dumbest group you have ever sat with. I will now prove it. If it were during the war and you four are Americans, you all gave American towns, did you hide them? Yes? Ha-ha. Gee, that's fascinating.
As a matter of fact, that's close enough to the ultimate secret that what I am going to do in the interest of time is forfeit the complete $80 and go for the story because it's just fascinating. These gentlemen were all airmen during World War II. They were shot down over Europe, and they were saved by this lady here and her husband, Mrs. Anne Brusselmans. Out in the audience, we have her husband who shared Mrs. Brusselman's accomplishments. I would like to have Mr. Brusselman stand up and take a bow, please. And in addition to these men, Mrs. Brusselmans and her husband helped 175 other Allied airmen to escape from the Nazis in Brussels, Belgium. Mrs. Brusselmans has been awarded the American Freedom Medal with Silver Palm, the Croix de Guerre, the Resistance Medal, the Order of Leopold II, and member of the British Empire. She is a well-decorated lady. Mrs. Brusselmans, naturally the first question to come to my mind is how did you get started in the underground?
Well, I was started by our clergyman who asked me if I would help men who had escaped from Dunkirk, and then after that the airmen came in, and that's how I started.
Now, this, my friends, was not at all an easy decision to be made because Belgium was, of course, at that time occupied by the Germans. The Brusselmans were living in a small apartment with their 2 children, a girl then 8 and a boy then 4. And the penalty for this kind of activity, as announced by the Germans themselves, was death. Now, Mr. Chernovsky, John, how did you find the underground?
Well, actually, Gary, they found me. When I bailed out about 15 miles into Germany and walked into Belgium. When I got into Belgium, 3 fellows started chasing me. Mm-hmm. Well, after a short run, I gave up, and luckily they turned out to be underground people. And they brought me over to this angel's house, and that was the end of that.
How long did you stay with this angel?
About 4.5 months all told.
How many men did you have in your home at one time, Mrs. Brusselmans?
5.
5 at a time?
5, yes.
Where did you put them all? In a small apartment?
Oh, everywhere. In the kitchen, in the bathroom, everywhere.
Any place
Where,
you
on
could
the
find
door, on the floor, anywhere.
And they could not leave the apartment, and they must needs be very quiet.
Oh, yes. They had to be very quiet, yes. That's right.
Well, Mrs. Brusselmans was telling us about habits that Americans had which tended to give them away to the enemy. Mr. Shipe, you were the engineer of a B-17 that was shot down over Holland, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then what did Mrs. Brusselmans teach you, for instance?
She taught us how to eat European style.
That is, not to change the knife and the fork back from hand to hand as we do in this country, but to keep the knife and the fork in the hand that you started with,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Mrs. Brusselmans, what other traits did the Americans have that gave them away to enemies?
Well, they had a trait, and they still have it now. It's to walk about with their hands in their pockets and jingle their money.
Where you find a man jingling his money, there you find an American, right?
That's right, yes.
That's most unfortunate indeed. Now, Mr. Lukowski, you were an engineer and a gunner, and you were shot down in 1943. You stayed with the Brusselmans 2 weeks. How was the food?
Wonderful. I don't know where she got it all.
This brings up a question. Now, how can you avoid suspicion and still get enough food to feed all of these excess people in your home?
Well, you bought them by small quantities, and you went in different shops, and you went 2-3 times a day, and just to try to not look very conspicuous.
Spread your trade around to several different shops.
That's right, yes.
Uh-huh. Well, Mrs. Brusselmans, with all of your good care, did any of these men give you any trouble?
Oh, yes, I think that Mort Mennick was the one, although it wasn't his fault, mind you. But he got picked up by another group who didn't know at all how to get him out of Belgium, and it took me about 5 weeks to find him, and then finally I got hold of him, and I didn't leave him out 1 minute after that.
Well, where were you all this time, Martin?
Gary, I really don't know. I had to trust these wonderful people that were looking after me. But during that 5 weeks, I think I became probably the best solitaire player in the country.
You were all by yourself in a room for 5 weeks you knew not where, huh?
Well, I had no connection. I had to trust these people who knew where I was and to find me again.
Well, Mrs. Brusselmans, did the Germans ever come to investigate you or possibly to arrest you?
No, they didn't come except twice in the house, or 3 times in the house. Twice they...
This is in the whole apartment building?
Oh, yes. They came to arrest other people, but of course, when you haven't got a clear conscience, you always think you're the culprit, huh?
She was telling me a fascinating story that one time, just 2 days before the liberation, how the Nazis did come to her apartment and were searching it, and in one room she was hiding a fugitive from the Nazis who was an armed man, and the Nazis were about to go to had their hand on the doorknob, were about to go into the room. And how did you keep them from going in, Mrs. Brusselmans?
Well, I told them Jack, my son, was ill, and that he had typhoid fever. And that just got them out.
And was that so? Mrs. Brusselmans and Mr. Brusselmans, the gentlemen here have told me that they want to present you with a gift that would really express their appreciation for all you did for them and for others, but they said it would be impossible to ever really repay you, and they've decided on something that I'm sure will make you both happy. These 4 gentlemen have decided, in honor of the Brusselmans family, to adopt 2 Belgian children through the foster parents' plan. And so they have done that to you.
That was very kind of you. Very, very kind of you. That's very nice.
Good. Well, you can all enjoy your reunion backstage. Mrs. Brusselmans, thank you very much. From us, all we can give you is our fondest thanks, appreciation, and admiration.
But I would like to also thank all the boys who came and helped us during the war, and I'm sure that it was a 50-50 job. If they hadn't been there, I wasn't needed. So there you are.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, money